Vampires, the blood-sucking terrors of the night who are more often than not tragic, alluring, and sexy. Many archetypes of the vampire exist in today's media. The teenage heartthrob in Vampire Diaries, the seductive and bloodthirsty adults of True Blood, the enemy of humans hunted down by vampire hunters like in Blade. Vampires come in all shapes, sizes, and power set. The vampire has existed all our lives, and I don't know about you, but I can't imagine a life that doesn't have some sort of vampire story in it. Before Renfield, before Vampire Diaries, before True Blood, before Twilight, before Interview with a Vampire, before Nosferatu 2024, 1979, and 1922, before every form of Dracula on screen and the 1897 book, and even before Carmilla, the modern vampire, or known as the romantic vampire, was born in 1819. Today, we're going to be talking about The Vampire, with a Y, by John William Polidori. For a long time, I was under the assumption that Dracula by Bram Stoker was the first published vampire novel, so imagine my surprise when I learned about Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. When I was researching about Carmilla, I was taken a surprise. Once again, how could they do it to me again? Carmilla isn't the first published vampire story. It was just published before Dracula. When I learned of the vampire's existence, that's when I realized I wanted to consume and research all of the vampire media available. All of it. I know that's not very realistic, but it's not going to stop me from trying. And you're being dragged along with me, bestie. Of course. Where else are you going to go? So let's start with the origin of the modern vampire. Look. What? Hello? Didn't know I was going to be popular. Okay. I know that there's a lot of folklore from a lot of different places about vampires before this point in history, but that's going to have to be a separate video. The video I am going to make about the history of the folklore of the vampire is just going to have to be for a different day. I'm going to be starting with a publication of the first vampire story that is readily available. Speaking of which, if you haven't read The Vampyre and you want to get started on it before I start the video, I have a link to the Project Gutenberg site where you can download the story and read it for yourself if you want. If you don't want to read it, don't worry. I'm going to be breaking down the story as thoroughly as possible so we're on the same page. And before anyone tells me, no, The Vampire by John William Polidori is not technically the first published vampire media, I'm going to stop you right there. There's a reason why I said story. There is a poem called De Vampyre that was released in 1748 by a German band, but it's very short, so I don't consider it the first published vampire story. I'll read it to you at the end of the video, and you can make your own judgment. Before we break down the video, do you want to hear some tea about some dead people? Because, bestie, there is tea, specifically about the author John William Polidori, who I will refer to as Mr. Polidori from here on. Just know that I'm mostly skimming this tea. I'm giving you the highlights because I think the highlights are very important. And if you find this tea fascinating, you should definitely look up for more details. It's going to be worth your time if you want to dive into it. One of the neighbors does yard work like every day, and I guess it was time for yard work. My bad. I didn't realize it was yard work o'clock. Mr. Polidori was born in 1795 to Italian father Gaetano Polidori, I said that wrong, I'm so sorry, and an English woman, Anna Marie Pierce. Mr. Polidori was smart, like really smart. He graduated from college at 19 with a medical degree. He only did medicine because he was really good at it. He wanted to be an author, so imagine his surprise when he gets hired by a pretty popular poet named Lord Byron to go on a tour with him only a year after he graduated college. And he's being paid by Lord Byron's publisher to keep a journey throughout the pair's travels. Tour in the 17 to 1800s meant a journey. usually across Europe, to go learn stuff and grow up before settling down, and was typically done by rich folks. So think backpacking across Europe after high school, but instead of just the summer, it's typically done over a couple of years. Mr. Polidori and Lord Byron couldn't see it, but everybody around the two could. The two were just not fated to be together for a long time. People around the pair told them not to go with the other one on this tour. Going on this tour was going to be a mistake. Did they listen? No. Am I glad they didn't listen? Yes. Something I noticed while surfing the web and reading articles about John William Polidori is that he was sensitive. And he had a pretty bad temper, which is not a good combo, especially since it seems that Lord Byron's way of interacting was playful teasing to downright antagonistic insults that Mr. Polidori then took very seriously and very offensively. Anyway, a huge volcano eruption happened in Indonesia like the year before, which messed up the weather everywhere for a year. In fact, 1816 was known as the year without a summer. 1816 is also when Mr. Polidori and Lord Byron set off for their grand tour. Let me set the scene. We are in Geneva, Switzerland, plagued by dark thunderclouds and heavy rains. A group of young people hang out in the house that Lord Byron had rented. They come up with an idea. Let's read some ghost stories out loud to each other. So they pick up Phantasmagoriana, which is a collection of German horror tales or poems translated into French. As midnight approaches, Lord Byron gets an idea. Let's have a contest. Let's see who can write the best horror story. The people in this group were Dr. John Polidori, poet Lord Byron, poet Percy Shelley, Claire Clairmont, and Mary Wollstonecraft, otherwise known as Mary Shelley. That's right. This is the contest in which Frankenstein was born. This is also the night that the modern vampire was born, but it wasn't Mr. Polidori's writing at first. Mary Shelley worked on Frankenstein, eventually winning the contest. Mr. Polidori wrote some random story about a ghost. Who knows what Percy wrote? And Claire did not participate. It was Lord Byron who worked on a vampire tale. This tale is dubbed a fragment and wasn't finished by Lord Byron, even though it was published later on, but we'll get to that. Lord Byron, only after a few months, would fire Mr. Polidori as his physician, to the surprise of no one. Why exactly he let Mr. Polidori go is a little hazy. In one article, it said that Percy Shelley and Mr. Polidori went on a boating race, and then Mr. Polidori got so butthurt he lost that he tried to force Percy into a duel, probably to the death, which Percy just laughed in his face. Who knows what actually happened, the inciting incident for Lord Byron to let Mr. Polidori go. Just know that whatever happened, Mr. Polidori did not take being fired very well. Surprise, surprise. With the inspiration of Lord Byron's unfinished vampire tale, Mr. Polidori would come up with a short story that we are going to be talking about, The Vampire, with a Y. The crazy part is that there is a huge chance that the vampire inside this story is based on Lord Byron himself. Spoiler alert, the vampire is not a good guy. Mr. Polidori decided that his vampire story sucked and left it with a person who then gave it to a publisher. Now here it is. Guess what the publisher did? You won't believe it, bestie. Just guess. Oh, wait. Okay, so the publisher published The Vampire and credited it to Lord Byron. Credit where credit is due. Lord Byron did everything in his power to make sure that Mr. Polidori got the author credits. He could have been a terrible person and claimed the writing for himself. He went so far as to publish his version of fragments so Mr. Polidori could get credit for The Vampyre. Lord Byron also didn't want to take the credit. I don't think he liked the story very much. Lord Byron definitely badmouthed the story and had no interest about writing about vampires. Even though Mr. Polidori ended up getting the rights to the story, he makes like no money on it. Unfortunately, Mr. Polidori's story ends pretty tragically. His writing career never took off, no matter how much passion or love he had for it. He suffered a pretty bad accident that gave him a nasty concussion that didn't do him any favors, and then in 1821 he was found dead. The coroner's verdict is that he died of natural causes or a visitation from God, but the family is pretty sure that he took prussic acid to commit suicide. It's also probable that since he was a doctor, he could have taken prussic acid as a remedy for any sort of stomach ailment, because that's what the doctors recommended at the time to take, because sure, take a poison for a tummy ache. What could possibly go wrong? We'll never know one way or another. It was a long time ago. All we know for sure is that he died at the age of 25 in 1821. All right, tea time is over, bestie. That was fun. Don't worry, those group of people will be coming back up again, and I will be going into more depth whenever I speak about Frankenstein. You can't stop me from talking about Frankenstein. I will tell you about Frankenstein. But we're not talking about Frankenstein right now. Let's go over the vampire story, and afterwards we'll discuss what kind of vampires we're dealing with. Our story begins at a party. Well, actually, it begins with an excerpt from a letter I don't care about and an introduction about vampires and how vampires is studied by doctors, and that is barely related and blah, 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 blah. I really don't care. Okay, it's not pertinent to the story like the prologue of Carmilla was. Our story begins at a party, so get your clubbing gear out. We're leaving in 5. Lord Ruthven is a nobleman in London, but he's weird. Very weird. He shows up at parties, but he hates parties and fairs and anything fun. He has a dead gray eye, which seems to penetrate the soul of anyone he's looking at. Deathly pale skin, charming charisma, and insanely hot. The common adulteress, what a wacky term, would throw themselves at him and he could care less. However, that did not mean he did not like the lady. Oh, no, no, no. He liked the ladies. He liked the innocent ones. The virtuous ones. Despite his oddities, everyone loved him and invited him everywhere for some reason. I don't think I have to tell you that Lord Ruthven is the vampire, the Lord Byron stand-in, if you will, the one who corrupts all. All of this that I just told you is available in the first paragraph of the story, and I can already sink my teeth into these hypothetical powers that Lord Ruthven may have. The dead gray eye is the most interesting to me, and I think it could be a version of true sight, soul sight. I think he can look and see if your soul is corrupted or corruptible, considering everyone appears to have a physical reaction to his gaze. Also, obvious charm effect because everybody loves him. The most important thing that I want to note is that he is a daywalker. You heard it here, folks. The first published vampire is a daywalker. Also at this party is our main character, an orphan named Aubrey. He's rich, he's smart, he's naive, he's handsome, and he's perfect prey for a vampire. He has a sister who will be really important later, and a few mysterious guardians who do not have names and are in charge of his wealth and well-being. All in all, this is a romantic idealist who is going to have a very bad time. Aubrey is curious about Lord Ruthven, and they do know each other. They hang out in the same rich folk circles, so they're familiar enough to each other to say what's up when they walk by each other. Aubrey had been floating the idea of a tour by his guardians, and before the party they said, sure, why not? Go backpacking. And Aubrey obviously tells Lord Ruthven his plan to go backpacking, and Lord Ruthven says, why are we backpacking when you could just ride with me in my fancy pants carriage? Aubrey is ecstatic to join Lord Ruthven in his travels abroad, so he says, yes, I'll go into your fancy pants carriage. What could possibly go wrong? The pair are now off on an adventure. However, just like rooming with your bestie for a long time, traveling with someone for an extended period of time gives you insight on someone's character. Aubrey is going to be gaining some valuable insight for us, and I'm not talking about Lord Ruthven's destroying the bathroom every day or hoarding dishes in his room. His companion was profuse in his liberality. The idle, the vagabond, and the beggar received from his hand more than enough to relieve their immediate wants. But Aubrey could not avoid remarking that it was not upon the virtuous reduced to indigence by the misfortunes attendant upon virtue that he bestowed his alms. These were sent from the door with hardly suppressed sneers. But when the profligate came to ask something, not to relieve his wants, but to allow him to wallow in his lust or to sink him still deeper in his iniquity, he was sent up away with rich charity. This was, however, attributed by him to the greater importunity of the vicious, which generally prevails over the retiring bashfulness of the virtuous indigent. There was one circumstance about the charity of his lordship which still more impressed upon his mind. All those upon whom it was bestowed inevitably found that there was a curse upon it, for they were all either led to the scaffold or sunk to the lowest and the most abject misery. So, his charity leads to misery and ruin. His money is cursed. And Lord Ruthven is an enabler to the max, and he loves his fashionable vice. This man loves to gamble, but like everything with Lord Ruthven, it's weird. When he goes against, and I quote, a rash youthful novice or the luckless father of numerous family, he wins 100% of the time and financially ruins them every time. This happens in every town they stop at. This man is a menace, just ruining lives through gambling. However, he doesn't take a single dollar from the gambling table. He just distributes the winnings of the other players. By all accounts, he loses at the tables every time. A little bit of an aside, there is a word called a sharper, which is an old-timey word that means con man, and I thought you should know about it because Lord Ruthven loses to known sharpers. Let's break this power down, because as abstract as it is, there's something supernatural going on and it has some weird rules. My theory is that this vampire is solely to be a wrecking ball to the virtuous partaking in vice, so things like gambling and sex. When a preacher with a good heart comes around asking for money and isn't partaking in any vice, there isn't anything Lord Ruthven can do to the preacher. But if we take the same preacher and give him the vice of gambling and his want to do gambling, Lord Ruthven can then ruin that preacher either by giving him money or taking all his money at the gambling table. However, if a sharper is gambling against him, he downright bests Lord Ruthven at his own game. So he has supernatural luck and the ability to curse the virtuous when they're doing something when they're not supposed to while gambling. And he has the ability to curse the wicked by giving them money to indulge in vice. I think I'm going to call this ability that he has the wrecking ball ability for brevity in the future. Aubrey sees this happen in real time and does think to confront Lord Ruthven about his wrecking ball ways, but it's never a good time to confront his companion. You know how it is. Aubrey and Lord Ruthven arrive in Rome, and somehow Lord Ruthven just disappears. He vanishes into thin air. Aubrey, of course, goes to track down Lord Ruthven, probably to save the coin purses of the locals or something, but gets stopped by someone delivering a bunch of letters from England because the land was flat and the weather was good. A few are from his dear sister, which doesn't really contain anything too important, and the others are from his guardians. His guardians have reason to believe that Lord Ruthven is bad news, like really bad news. The guardians have sussed out something interesting. The reason why Lord Ruthven doesn't like adulteresses is not because he doesn't like them. He finds more pleasure, immense pleasure actually, in corrupting virtuous women, or the virtuous hiding the fact that they aren't virtuous, seducing them, tossing them aside, and then watching the ladies throw the virtuous mask aside and becoming harlots. or something. Aubrey has an aha moment. The reason why Lord Ruthven has been missing must be that he is seducing an innocent and virtuous lady at this very moment. So he goes to find out about Lord Ruthven's evil schemes. In Aubrey's investigation, he finds that Lord Ruthven is trying to seduce the daughter of a lady who we've visited quite often. They don't have a name, so don't worry about it. However, in Italy, according to the book, I've never been to Italy, an unmarried woman doesn't really meet with a man in public, so Lord Ruthven has been working in the shadows, secretly. Aubrey figures out where his companion is and bursts into the room and proclaims, "You monster! You seduce women, evilly!" And Lord Ruthven says, "Who? Me? No, you have someone else." Our protagonist decides that he can no longer travel with Lord Ruthven in good conscience, so he drafts a letter letting Lord Ruthven know that they're breaking up as travel buddies, and then he also sends a letter to the lady letting her know that Lord Ruthven is evilly seducing her daughter. Aubrey packs up, leaves Rome, and instead hangs out in Greece because Greek history is cool and he wanted to wander the ruins around those parts. He stumbles upon this beautiful Greek lady named Ianthe and falls in love with her. They hang out in the ruins as he takes notes, and she distracts him from taking notes. She tells him stories of the local folklore and tells Aubrey about a monster that we're all going to find very interesting. Ianthe tells Aubrey about the vampire. The vampire blends in with society and is forced to drink the life of a lady. Aubrey thinks it's poppycock, and Ianthe is insistent that he believes her. I think he deep down knows that vampires exist, because how else would Ianthe perfectly describe Lord Ruthven if not? Still, he tries to dissuade her from believing in that kind of stuff. Ianthe's parents also insist that vampires are real, and that the ruins that Aubrey has his sights set on are not a good place to explore, because he should be going through the forest at night. That is the forest where the vampires hang out and do nefarious things, like orgies. Aubrey tries to laugh off this superstition to the horror of Ianthe and her parents. Aubrey then swears that he will be back from the ruins before nightfall and to not worry. So anyway, it's nightfall and he's passing through the orgy forest. It's storming and horrible and it's freaking out the horses, so we're lost. Aubrey then finds a hut in the darkness, so figures it's a good idea to knock and ask for directions when he hears the distressed sounds of a lady. Aubrey breaks into the hut, seizes the foul beast in the dark, but is thrown off and slammed into the wall and knocked senseless. Before we can see who the attacker of the lady is, the townfolk come by with torches, so the aggressor flees. The villagers find Aubrey first, and he lets them know that there was a lady in the hut, which must be huge if they didn't find her already, to make sure that she's okay. To the horror of Aubrey, the villagers find Ianthe dead with teeth marks on her throat, drained of blood. If only someone had told Aubrey this would happen. Maybe we could have prevented this. What a shame. As the town folks are freaking out because one of their own died to a vampire, Aubrey finds a dagger without its sheath. A unique dagger without its sheath. Please remember the dagger for later. So this next bit is interesting because this is a plot point in other gothic horror stories. Aubrey is seized with a most violent fever. I looked it up. Fevers in this time period meant something a bit more broadly than just, oh no, I'm 103 degrees. Fever encompassed general illnesses, headaches, flushed skin, delusions, blah, blah, blah. Dracula, Frankenstein, and this story all use the main character going into a delirious fever due to the horrors or trauma they experienced and needing to be taken care of extensively by those around them. Look, I get it. I get it. This stuff is whack, but please, pull yourself together. Aubrey's fever makes him say wacky things. Most notably wacky is, "No, Lord Ruthven, don't eat my girlfriend," and "How dare you eat my girlfriend, Lord Ruthven?" Guess who happens to be in the same part of Greece as we are? That's right, our best buddy, Lord Ruthven. He found out about Aubrey's fever and immediately took to taking care of him until he got better. When Aubrey becomes a functioning human again, he's very taken aback that Lord Ruthven, who Aubrey is like 75% sure is a vampire, has been taking care of him this whole time. This totally not a vampire convinces Aubrey that he's not a terrifying cloud of evil who just killed his girlfriend and they are now traveling buddies once again. Aubrey is very depressed staying in the town where his girlfriend died, so he asks the Lord Ruthven, if they can start traveling to, I don't know, anywhere else so they can outrun the sad. There have been rumors of robbers and bandits in the area, so the pair figure it's a really good idea to hire some guards just in case. Too bad the guards are pansies. Suddenly, gunshots are flying over our heads. We duck behind a rock and regret our life's choices a little as a treat, when, for a really dumb reason, the two come out to try and find the robbers. Lord Ruthven, unsurprisingly, is immediately shot with a bullet and is fatally wounded. The robbers, it turns out, didn't actually want to kill them. They just wanted the two rich-looking people for ransom. So the robbers take Aubrey and Lord Ruthven to a nearby cabin while they get the whole ransom thing sorted out and leave the two to their own devices until the robbers can get their money. Lord Ruthven has been mortally wounded, by the way, despite him not dying that very second. He lasts like 2 days, his strength rapidly declining and like no apparent pain, but he most definitely dies. However, right before he dies, he tells Aubrey this quote: "Assist me. You may save me. You may do more than that. I need not my life. I heed the death of my existence as little as that of the passing day, but you may save my honor, your friend's honor." "How? Tell me how. I would do anything," replied Aubrey. "I need but little. My life ebbs apace. I cannot explain the whole, but if you would conceal all you know of me, my honor would free from stain in the world's mouth. And if my death were unknown for some time in England, it shall not be known. Swear!" cried the dying man, raising himself with exultant violence. "Swear by all your soul reveals, by all your nature fears, swear for a year and a day you will not impart your knowledge of my crime or death to any living being in any way, whatever may happen or whatsoever you may see." His eyes bursting from their sockets. "I swear," said Aubrey. He sunk, laughing, upon his pillow and breathed no more. Aubrey tries to go to bed after that whole thing, but for some reason, your girlfriend dying, your totally not vampire friend dying with the strangest last words you've ever heard, with a oath that you needed to make, and being held at gunpoint for ransom makes it a little hard to catch some shut-eye. So Aubrey gives up and tries to go visit Lord Ruthven's body, but the robber said that one of Lord Ruthven's last wishes for his body was to be exposed to the first cold ray of the moon that rose after his death. Aubrey is like, "All right then, can you take me to where you left the body?" To which the nicest robbers in the world go, "Sure, of course." When they go to where Lord Ruthven's body was, it's gone. And this quote is actually really funny to me. Aubrey, astonished and taking several of the men, determined to go and bury it upon the spot where it laid. But when he had mounted to the summit, he found no trace of either the corpse or the clothes, though the robbers swore they pointed out the identical rock on which they had laid the body. Thank God, Lord Ruthven reanimates with his clothes on. Let's take a quick stop here to gather our bearings in terms of the vampire powers and weaknesses. I'll start with a weakness. Lord Ruthven can get shot. He gets shot in the shoulder and dies 2 days later, which is oddly realistic. The next power is the most obvious one, which is rising from the dead with clothes on. The caveat is that his body has to see the cold moon's ray after his death or something like that. So it's actually kind of a specific way of reanimation. I think that if he doesn't see those moon's rays, he just stays dead. I kind of like it. It makes The vampire, a monster we mortals can defeat without jumping through 8 hoops to do so. Aubrey is done with Greece at this point. When the ransom gets paid and the robbers sent Aubrey on his way, he takes Lord Ruthven's things, and wouldn't you know it, in Lord Ruthven's things, there is a unique sheath for a unique dagger. The same dagger found at the crime scene of Ianthe's death, sealing Aubrey's knowledge that Lord Ruthven was indeed Ianthe's murderer. In Aubrey's journey back home, he stops by Rome to check up on the woman and her daughter. You know, the one that Aubrey sent a letter to try and tell him that Lord Ruthven was evil and would ruin their lives. Well, wouldn't you know it, the letter never made it to the woman. It was intercepted by Lord Ruthven. The parents of the girl hadn't seen their daughter since Lord Ruthven, and they've been financially ruined. Great. That only makes Aubrey more depressed. The only thing that Aubrey is now focusing on is getting back to England to protect his sister. Okay, whoops. I had a voracious hunger that needed to be sated right then and didn't finish actually recording. Okay. It's a new day. Pretend I've been wearing these clothes. Luckily, nothing has happened to his sister. Yet. She is there to lift his spirits when he finally arrives at the mansion. By the way, I forgot to mention this in the last video for Carmilla. A Schloss is the German word for castle and is the only word that Mr. Lafanu uses to describe their place of living. It completely slipped my mind to make sure that y'all knew what that meant, and I'm sorry. Anyway, this is just a mansion. There's no fancy pants German words here. Aubrey is now here to protect his sister. So the Guardians are now trying to find a suitor for Aubrey's sister. His sister is just referred to as Miss Aubrey and doesn't have a name. And I think that's lame. So we're going to give her a name. We're going to call her Lucy. Lucy is a beautiful, blue-eyed 18-year-old and is in need of a husbando. So of course, we're going to be throwing a party. Aubrey is not really having it, though. I don't think the therapists were really a thing in 1819. So he just gets to sit with all his trauma and stew in it and brood in corners with dark storm clouds over his head. As he's brooding in this lovely party, he feels someone seize his arm from behind him, and a familiar voice speaks in his ear and says, "Remember your oath." Aubrey's heart falls straight through his shoes, and he is frozen with absolute terror, which makes sense. Lord Ruthven should be dead, but clearly he's not, because he's over there mingling. Aubrey leaves the party immediately, like right then, that moment, because he is horrified to know for a fact that the dead can rise again, and that Lord Ruthven is a vampire. With a Y. A few nights after the party, Aubrey goes and hangs out with Lucy and friends who are conversing in a living room. He wants to sit next to his sister, so he asks someone to please scooch over. Who is this person? Bestie, you already know. It's none other than Lord Ruthven. Aubrey takes Lucy by the hand, trying to leave immediately, but he's not fast enough for Lord Ruthven to again whisper in his ear, "Remember your oath." Now, Lucy is like, "Hey, bro, what gives?" And the little bit that Aubrey does tell her scares his sister, so he stops. And then he thinks, "I did give my oath. I can't speak a word of Lord Ruthven's affliction to everyone, to anyone. The affliction being that he's actually dead," which is stupid, absurd. the actual worst. Instead of letting the entire story hinge on Aubrey being silent of his own volition, I personally submit that this is actually another vampire power that I will dub the Oath Bond. Making an oath to a vampire is vaguely similar, in my mind, in inviting them into your house, but instead of your house, it is your words and actions. At least that's how I'm justifying it, because Aubrey has no excuse not to tell at least his sister that Lord Ruthven is a vampire, or at least extremely dangerous. It just makes this old trope of not being able to tell someone something because you made an oath a little more palatable. The knowledge of Lord Ruthven being not only alive, but in the same circle that Lucy hangs out with is eating Aubrey up inside. He doesn't take care of himself. He barely interacts with someone except to maybe mumble something incoherently and wanders the streets. Lucy hires some people to watch him, but Aubrey is so paranoid that instead of talking to these people, which I assume he might know, he just runs away from them, terrified. In one of his stupors, he realizes that he needs to take a different approach. So he can't break his oath, but he can try to keep his friends and family, specifically Lucy, away from Lord Ruthven. So he gets all snazzied up with a new suit, hypes himself up, tells himself that he is such a cool guy, and goes to a party, sees Lord Ruthven, and absolutely loses his mind. And his mental fortitude declines rapidly shortly after. At this point, his guardians are concerned for his well-being, rightfully so, mind you, so they give him a physician who eventually has to restrict Aubrey to his room to keep himself from hurting himself and sort of others. He hasn't done any violence toward anybody else, but just in case. He is freaking everyone out, though. Then he starts falling into a deep, deep, dark depression. The types of depression where you don't leave your bed for days and you start losing a lot of weight and you get that haunted look in your eye. You know what I'm talking about. I gotta read y'all the quote, but I gotta wait for my stupid Kindle with my stupid highlights to load. Just give me a second. Oh, do not go near him. If your love for me is aught, do not go near him. When, however, she inquired to whom he referred, his only answer was true, true. And again, he sank into a state whence not even she could rouse him. If my theory of an oath bond is correct, I would say that this is a consequence of attempting to circumvent or break your oath with a vampire. He's completely gone mentally for months. However, as the year deadline starts to approach, he is starting to feel more and more like himself. Finally, 2 days before the year and a day is up, Lucy tells Aubrey that she's getting married tomorrow, which is cool. He's happy and asks who the lucky guy is. And Lucy tells us it's Earl of Marston, which Aubrey thinks he's familiar with that person and congratulates her warmly with tears streaking down his face because he's so happy. It isn't until he sees the picture inside of a locket Lucy is wearing that he realizes the Earl of Marston is none other than Lord Ruthven. Aubrey freaks out and he destroys the locket. And you know what? Listen to this. Upon her asking him why he thus destroyed the resemblance of her future husband, he looked as if he did not understand her. Then seizing her hand and gazing on her with a frantic expression of countenance, he bade her swear that she would never wed this monster but he could not advance. It seemed as if the voice again bade him remember his oath. He turned suddenly round, thinking Lord Ruthven was near him, but saw no one. This is what makes me think that the oath is supernaturally binding and not because Aubrey is exceptionally honorable. Anyway, their guardians and the physician restrain him as he's begging everyone to just please delay the wedding. One night. No one listens to him as they shut the door. Then we get a little bit from Lord Ruthven's perspective. He learns of Aubrey's insanity and thinks about how he seduced Lucy, which was just too easy for him, and how he expertly arranged the marriage to happen the day before Aubrey could speak about what Lord Ruthven actually was. Aubrey is trying his hardest to reach out to Lucy to delay the wedding. He tries to bribe servants. Nope. Tries to write a letter. Nope. He tries to scream. That doesn't work either. In the morning, he hears the preparations of the wedding going through. So he forces his way through the one servant guarding his room, a little old lady. Don't worry, he doesn't hurt her, and attempts to crash the wedding. He is then stopped by Lord Ruthven. Hold on. Where's my hat? Hold on, I have a bit to do. My hat, where'd it go? When on the staircase, Lord Ruthven whispered in his ear, "Remember your oath, and know if not my bride today, your sister is dishonored." I hope this is the accent I used yesterday. "Women are frail." So saying, he pushed himself towards his attendants, who, roused by the old woman, had come in search of him. Aubrey could no longer support himself. His rage, not finding vent, had broken a blood vessel, and he was conveyed to bed. I will be honest, Aubrey showed the appropriate amount of anger for this situation. He was so angry, he gave himself an aneurysm. The marriage happens despite Aubrey's efforts. Also, I am not joking. He gave himself an actual aneurysm. He dies shortly after midnight, his last act telling his guardians who and what Lord Ruthven was. And he dies. In vain. His guardians run to hopefully save Lucy from the jaws of death, but it was too late. The guardians hastened to protect Miss Aubrey, but when they arrived, it was too late. Lord Ruthven had disappeared, and Aubrey's sister had gluttoned the thirst of a vampire with a Y. The end. Before we revisit and summarize the vampire powers, I wanted to touch on where Lord Byron's tale ended, so you know exactly what part of the story was fully inspired by Lord Byron's rough draft. You know the part where Lord Ruthven gets shot and died? That's where Lord Byron's tale ended, except I think there was something involving a ring, and he doesn't come back. But the plan is that the vampire would come back. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't read it. It's not a completed story, and it's not the first one published, which I know is kind of petty considering it was originally Lord Byron's idea. But we would have never seen his version if the publisher didn't give credit to the wrong person. Let's talk about Mr. Polidori's vampire. First, and my favorite, he is a daywalker. There is literally no physical drawbacks from him frolicking in the daylight, handing despair on a platter. However, he is easily dispatched. No need to stake him, no need to decapitate him, no destroying grave dirt, none of that. If you shoot him and then throw him in the dirt without letting his body ever see the moonlight, you're going to be fine. He is very charismatic and can obviously charm people, and has the soul sight with his dead gray eye. There is also that wrecking ball ability, which has a whole bunch of rules to it that I'm not rehashing. And then the oath bond. Personally, I think the oath bond is most interesting, but I did kind of make it up. The bones of the oath bond thing being canonically supernatural is there, but isn't overtly stated. Kinda. I mean, I think it is, but you could debate me on it. Last but not least, I personally think that this guy is supernaturally evil. He goes out of his way to completely destroy Aubrey's life after he calls Lord Ruthven out. There was no need for Lord Ruthven to track down and kill Aubrey's girlfriend. Although if he had stopped there, I would have been less inclined to say he's supernaturally evil. But then he goes on to take care of Aubrey, oath bond him when he dies, drive Aubrey into pure paranoia, depression, seduce his sister, and then kill his sister. If you still don't believe that this guy is supernaturally evil, go back to the wrecking ball ability and the fact that he is purposely trying to ruin lives for the lulz. This man is evil incarnate. Not gonna lie. I think I like this vampire. This vampire is the first one, so I'm taking that into account. This vampire is less about physical power or strength or even immortality, and more on being a walking, talking red flag. The worst red flag to ever be. He takes immense pleasure in manipulating people into being the worst versions of themselves and ruining their lives because of it. The whole drinking blood thing is not even the point. He just drinks blood of ladies sometimes. This vampire is definitely different from the modern vampire we have today, or even Carmilla for that matter. Lord Ruthven is irredeemable. He is the worst, and at no point does he try to convince us that he isn't the worst. He is evil incarnate. He's a wrecking ball through people's lives, and Do I like him as a vampire or a villain? Golly, Mr. Polidori did not like Lord Byron if Lord Ruthven is based on him. Anyway, point being, I like this vampire, even though it's slightly underdeveloped, but it is the first one. And I do have a soft spot for the origin of things. So what can I say? It's a pretty good vampire, despite not having a lot of blood drinking. So what do I think of the story proper? I mean, I just hyped up the villain a lot. That must mean I like this story. Adore it even. I'm not gonna lie, it's really tough getting through the story the first time, unlike Carmilla and Dracula for that matter, but we'll talk about Dracula in the next video. The language for this short story, and this is a short story, not a novella, is really rough. The sentences go on forever. And there's rarely any dialogue. And by rarely, I mean there is one full conversation with quotations, and I read it to you. I had to wombo combo an audiobook version and a Kindle version at the same time to get through it the first time. This is not a story I would recommend if you don't read classic literature for funsies all the time. But if you are interested in reading it, you could definitely power through it because it is insanely short. The story is fine for what it is after you get used to reading it. It's interesting to see a story that only has folkloric vampires to draw from for inspiration. I'm not familiar with vampires of folklore, but some of the readings I had read said that vampires of old were more like zombies and not the whole seduce the women folk and is insanely hot that we're used to, but I can't confirm that's true, so don't quote me on it. One of these days, I will deep dive on it and become a cool vampire expert through and through, so I'll get back to you on that. I've always had a keen interest on the origins of tropes, monsters, genres, etc., etc. I love seeing how things started and where they end up years later. Stuff like the origins of cyberpunk with William Gibson's Neuromancer to the comparison of how we do cyberpunk today. We have J.R.R. Tolkien being the grandfather of modern high fantasy and how it's evolved as a genre. One of my favorite books, Frankenstein, is credited with being one of the first science fiction books, and look how that genre evolved. While the writing of the short story is rough and the vampire doesn't look how it does today, the short story isn't bad in my book because it is the origin story of the vampire we have today. This is the origin story of vampires. I also think that Robert Eggert could make a great movie out of this story, just saying. So, bestie, now we're here. The origin of the vampire has been told to you by me. We both know how the vampire started. Lord Ruthven terrorizing Aubrey until the death of the people Aubrey cared about, and himself. Made by a man scorned by his ex-employer. The origin story of vampires was written on a dark and stormy night, like the origins of many a horror story. Where do we go from here? I'm so glad you asked. I know the answer to that question, Bessie. What better story to talk about after learning the origins of the vampire than the one that launched the vampire into the public zeitgeist? That's right, bestie. The next video, it's Dracula. I can't wait to discuss this book with you. It's one of my favorites. I gotta go now, bestie. Got some reading to do. I'll leave you with that 1748 poem I told you about. The Vampire by Heinrich August Ossenfelder. My dear young maiden clingeth unbending, fast and firm, to all the long-held teaching of a mother ever true. As in vampires unmortal, folks on Tisa portal, hey duck-like do believe, but my Christine thou dost dally, and wilt my loving parry till I myself avenging to a vampire's health a drinking, him toast and pale tokay, and as softly thou art sleeping, to thee shall I come creeping, and thy life's blood drain away, and so shall thou be trembling, for thus shall I be kissing, and death's threshold thou it crossing, with fear in my cold arms, and last shall I thee question, compared to such instructions, what are a mother's term? I'm freaking done. Yay!